So Dan, it would be awesome to get started with a little bit of your journey into the world of veganism. What brought you here?
Well, it was the animals, is the simple answer. But the way that happened was that when my acting career started to, I'm not going to say take off, because that would be misinforming people as to my status. It's not taken off as such, but I was in a few independent films and a Disney TV show about probably 8 to 10 years ago. And as a result of that, I was asked to be a patron or an ambassador for a lot of animal charities. I was already doing a lot of work at, campaign protests, that sort of stuff. But as I started to get a little bit higher profile in acting, I was offered the chance to represent some charities like the Born Free Foundation and Nature Watch and IAPWA, 12 of them, I think, at the moment. And as that started to happen, and it was strange how it happened. I suddenly became very aware of the hypocrisy of me standing on a podium and asking people for help to save the lion, the tiger, the elephant, the rhino, whatever it may be, and then I'd be off to order an animal-based sandwich or something. And I just realised that the hypocrisy was a bit much. And it was at the same time as that, Giles, my co-director and my good friend for many years, was already vegan, like about a year or two before me, and he was very aware of my animal activism and the conservation work that I do. And he planted the seed a few times and said, as per our conversation in the film, in fact, he said, you're going to have to do the vegan thing. And I was just kind of in that stuck state for quite some time, and then all of a sudden it just clicked. So between him saying, "Come on, dude, get with it," and the hypocrisy of speaking for animals and eating animals, I just suddenly overnight made the change, which was about 8 years ago now.
Was that transition quite easy? It sounds like you got it logically. You'd had the conversation with Giles, like you say. Morally, it made sense based on what you were doing. Was the practicalities quite easy for you?
It was absolutely straightforward, simple. I mean, I do have the benefit of having, like, if you think about around about that period 8 years ago, was right on the cusp of when it just went from being marginalized still to being much, much more accepted, much more mainstream, much more products available. Not necessarily healthy, but if you're transitioning, it certainly helps, with those meat alternatives. So it was really straightforward, actually. And I think that came as a surprise to me, because I think an awful lot is done to make us think that it's really not going to be easy. And I don't think that's an accident. I think that's pretty deliberate. So, yeah, I found it easy, both in terms of the logistics of finding food, replacing animal-based products with alternatives, but and not just the let's call it the processed alternatives, but also just things like beans and lentils and nut roasts instead of a piece of meat. But I think more than anything, it not only was it easy psychologically, it actually felt like a liberation psychologically. I just felt so light and so clean, and when I say that, I don't mean I'd felt heavy and dirty before. I just mean that it's the same as when I stopped drinking alcohol. I didn't ever have a problem with alcohol. I didn't feel bad drinking alcohol. I just was me. But when I stopped, suddenly you have the benefit of the contrast, and I realised how much better I felt. The same was true of going vegan, for sure.
Obviously, you knew Giles, but was there kind of other friends and family who went on the journey with you, or was this a bit of a solo endeavour? Solo,
100%, yeah, solo. And I probably knew a lot of vegans accidentally through animal activism. I was going on protest marches and I was talking at events and stuff like that. And actually, I have to say that to their credit, they, not that there's a right or a wrong way to go about it, but there's your authentic way. My authentic way is to not be judgmental. Again, hence the film being the way it is, same as Giles's way. We're not in your face about it. And so I was probably surrounded by vegans throughout that animal activism era, which I'm still in, but they just didn't shove it down my throat, so to speak.
Yeah. And were there sources of information for you that sort of stand out as pivotal? Like, were there documentaries that kind of informed where you were at in terms of your journey?
Yeah, there were. But I have to say, and this is interesting too, in terms of the making of Food for Thought, is I didn't watch those films until they were relevant to me. It's interesting, isn't it? Because actually, and that's probably just me. And it's kind of naive. It feels quite naive to admit it, but it's true. I didn't watch the likes of What the Health or Cowspiracy or Forks Over Knives until I was vegan, and then it became relevant, and then I watched it, and it just reinforced what I was thinking. And I think that's indicative of that very, very prevalent human nature in all of us, where until it was part of my life, I was like, well, why would I watch that? Even if I may have found it useful and informative and even entertaining, but I didn't see it as relevant, so I didn't watch it. And so that's, again, it kind of informed how we made Food for Thought, because I guess we were thinking, well, how do you get into the people that just wouldn't watch it? So there was lots of information available, but I honestly pretty much, it just happened. There's tons of resources available through Veganuary and the Vegan Society and the documentaries, as you say, and really, yeah, and they help absolutely if you need that support and that information, that assistance those things can give you. It's there and it's fantastic and it's invaluable. But I just found it so, I guess that kind of underlines the point I made before about how easy I found it. I didn't really feel like I needed help. It was just like, oh right, so now I buy lentils and chickpeas instead of chicken and eggs or whatever. It's simple.
Yeah. Talking of, I know, totally understand that approach. What's relevant to you. There's a particular moment in the film, and I'm going to go forward and then come back to the sort of the beginning of the film, if you like. But just as it's relevant to this particular moment, there's a moment in the film where you talk about slaughterhouse footage, and this builds up to I won't ruin the ending for folks, but this builds up to a moment in the film where you kind of experience something, and you mentioned at the beginning that it wasn't relevant to you when you became vegan, which was kind of really interesting. And then Giles was obviously giving his perspective. It'd be good to kind of understand that mindset. Has that shifted for you now, or are you kind of back where you were, where you think actually now I get it, and I don't need it to propel my activism?
Yeah, it's a great question, and actually it kind of underlines again the disconnect that we're capable of as human beings, because there I was, absolutely unquestionably an animal lover, because I was speaking on behalf of animals, but I was being speciesist in the sense that I was protecting some and I was eating others, and at that point in my life I didn't even see it as relevant, because not because I thought no it's not relevant to me because I'm not vegan or my lifestyle doesn't dictate that I need to see that. It literally was a case of cognitive dissonance. It was such a disconnect on my part, consciously or subconsciously, where I just didn't. I felt like I was already bought in, so I didn't need to watch it because it wouldn't achieve anything. And this is what I'm sort of careful to underline this when I speak about the film, because in the film, I'm conscious of the fact that I say I don't think it serves a purpose, and I'm referring to me personally. I think that the footage, slaughterhouse footage, absolutely serves a purpose. It's the reason why some people go vegan. It's the reason why some people stay vegan. And I was mistakenly under the impression that because I was already an animal lover, I didn't need to see that footage. I was already bought in. Clearly, I wasn't, because I wasn't vegan. And I guess all it comes down to is that authenticity in terms of how you deliver your message, and how in the film, as you rightly point out, we talk about me watching the footage, but the viewer doesn't have to see or hear it. They just see. Yeah. They see the reaction it causes, not the footage itself, because that's a great reason for someone to switch off, to turn the other way. I would have done, because it's this kind of thing you can't unsee, as I'm sure you know. It's really brutal, and as per our conversation in the film, it's the natural response to that is to just go, no, I don't want to see it. But the problem arises when you can't even face watching it, but you then literally pay someone else to do it, contribute to it by buying animal-based products.
Totally makes sense. And a bit of personal disclosure, I've had the same. It was relevant to me, that particular moment, because I felt like I'd had the same kind of journey with it, insofar as I became vegan after watching Cowspiracy, which isn't a particularly brutal film, back in 2017. It centres around the environment. rather than kind of working in animal activism, I'd had felt that I was an environmentalist. I would kind of say that to people if I was describing myself, and then saw this and thought, hold on a minute, earth-shattering, etc. But never felt that it was really relevant for me to watch the slaughterhouse footage until much later. It was kind of, I get it, it's bad, I'm not buying into it, I don't want to be part of it, but it felt relevant later, but at a certain point. So that bit of the film really kind of stood out for me. What also stood out for me about the film, and I'd love to find out a little bit about where it came about and whether this particular methodology was very important. I think I'm guessing it clearly was, but the way in which the particular message is delivered in the documentary is very, and I'm not sure I've got the right words for it, but it's gentle yet informative, accessible maybe is the word that I would use. Mm-hmm. Easy, palatable, takes you on the journey without, like you say, without the kind of sledgehammer approach. Tell us about that and the kind of inception of the documentary from that point of view. Why was that particular message and methodology, style of delivery important to you and Giles?
There's a lot of reasons behind it, but I think the two fundamental reasons for that are twofold. One, it's authentically us, and I think you have to, however you deliver your message, it's going to carry more weight, it's going to hold that energy, be more powerful, and do its job better if it's authentic. And again, I reiterate, I'm not suggesting that a more brutal approach, like, there's films like Earthlings and Dominion are absolutely essential. They probably arguably change more people to vegan than anything else, but that isn't authentically me. Just the same as I'm not the sort of person that will go on social media and get into full-blown arguments. I'm going to take the much more softly approach. And so that was a key thing. But I think you could even say more important than that was the simple reality that what the film was aimed at doing was changing minds, changing hearts. We wanted more people to find their way onto the path. And you don't need to be an expert in human nature to realize that people don't often respond well to being, bashed over the head with something they're doing wrong or having something shoved down their throat. So if your start point is, we want this to change as many hearts and minds as possible, and we want it, as you quite rightly pointed out, to be accessible, to be relatable, to be non-judgmental, non-preachy. If you want to do that, and therefore to get as many people onto the path as possible, it really does inform you as to the vibe, if you like, the dynamic of the film, which is absolutely a conscious decision. And again, I'm always careful to point out that I'm not suggesting that's the right way and the other ways to do it are the wrong way, because that would be ironic, wouldn't it? That'd be me saying I'm going to be non-judgmental about veganism, but I'm going to be totally judgmental about filmmaking and about message delivery. That's not the case. It's very much a case of, as I say, honouring and serving your authenticity and delivering the message in the way that serves that as well as possible. And luckily, Giles and I are both of the same mindset, where it's, let's not beat people over the head about it. And some people won't respond to it for that reason. In fact, ironically, the biggest tranche of criticism we've received about the film, and I expected this, I knew it would happen, is from the more extreme elements of the vegan community, not from the carnivores. It's the elements of the vegan community that say you haven't hit people hard enough with this. You need to be explaining to people so that they can understand the ethical principles of veganism. And I get where they're coming from. I completely buy into the ethical principles of veganism, live by them myself. But again, that's just another barrier between us and them. It's a way of making the film less accessible, as you called it, or less relatable. So you have to be very careful with that.
Given that style of messaging, do you think that is perhaps, if not missing, underserved from the way in which us in the sort of vegan world communicate with folks? Is there perhaps, for argument's sake, a little too much concern maybe about talking to other vegans and not enough concern given to the audience that we're trying to reach, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I mean, in certain parts of the vegan community, I hate to say it, but it's true. There are those folks that are more concerned about correcting the likes of Giles and myself for having made a film about veganism wrong, not good enough, than to talk to the folks that aren't vegan at all. I'll give you a good example where I had a comment just this weekend gone by on the YouTube channel, literally saying, and as people will discover when they watch the film, I drive a Tesla, and I wish I didn't. I'm embarrassed by it. In fact, if I could put my hands on it, I'd show you my bumper sticker that I bought saying I bought this before we knew Elon was crazy, and you could replace the word crazy for a number of different things now. But someone literally commented on the YouTube channel saying, please don't buy cars from fascists. There's plenty of other car manufacturers, and the fact that they're not just noticing a Tesla, but they're not thinking to themselves, well, Elon kind of showed his hand maybe 9 months ago on the campaign trail. Well, that's when we started to realize that he was not who we thought he was. My car, which you see the registration in the film, which is a 2019 car, so 6 years ago, we certainly didn't know anything about this. In fact, Tesla, the reason I bought the Tesla is because it was by far the most progressive of all the cars in terms of being a vegan, because you can buy a cloth interior vehicle from any manufacturer, but they all had a leather-bound steering wheel and gear stick. It was almost impossible to get a car that wasn't completely vegan. I think the Polestar was the only other one. So I bought the Tesla because it was the most progressive in terms of environmental protection and in terms of veganism. Some 6 years later, I've got extreme vegans, if you can, maybe extreme is the wrong word, but I've got a vegan who's so misguided in their approach that they're actually calling me out for driving a Tesla that I bought 6 years ago, not even thinking, okay, well, they'd have to reshoot that whole segment of the film where the car appears, which is actually, as you know, I won't give it away for people who haven't seen the film, but it plays a significant role in the film. And what were we to do? Delay by another year or two and find another 30 grand just to film those sequences without a Tesla? It's just so ludicrous that people focus on that, and actually not just focus on it, but that they post it, thereby presumably trying to draw people's attention away from the key underlying message, which is please be kind to animals and please think about starting your journey on this path yourself, and calling out the filmmaker for being in support of a fascist, which is just so ludicrous. I mean, as it happens, I stand in complete opposition, very publicly as well. I stand in complete opposition to everything that's happening in that part of the world with that particular individual. But rather than just think, okay, this could change some hearts and minds, which thankfully 99.5% of the comments do illustrate that people they're picking up on the thing that, like you said, accessible, non-judgmental, non-preachy. It's relatable. It's as you've seen. Hopefully, you agree that it's got some humour in there, which it just makes it more palatable for people to just sit and watch it when they otherwise probably wouldn't, because they just scroll on by because it's not relevant to them. If we can get them in the first minute and a half watching that opener, hopefully they'll think, I might enjoy this, and then we get our message across. Of course, we're not perfect. We're not trying to be. We're trying to fill a gap. So back, very long-winded way to your question, I do think it's underserved, but I think it's improving. Our film is one part of that, but that's exactly what we tried to do, is to fill that gap with the sole purpose of, again, reaching more people. I don't care if I'm upsetting extreme vegans who think that I haven't gone hard enough, because I could literally ask them the question, what's more important, that people adhere to your very prescribed way of thinking in its entirety, or they're not good enough and they can just not bother at all, or that people start to reduce or even end their use of animal products? And if the answer isn't the second one, you've got to seriously question your values, and you've got to question what your priorities are and what you're trying to serve. Is it a cause, or is it an ego? So I think it's a very dangerous subject to get into, and I'm sure I'll get some backlash for saying that as well. And I welcome it, because something needs to wake these people up, because it's not an opinion, it's a fact. It's literally that question. What's more important to you, that people subscribe to your set of beliefs and do it your way, or that they do it at all? And I know my answer is, I don't care if people disagree with me. I don't care if they're extreme vegans. They can be that because they're vegan. I just want people to change. And I think it's fairly safe to say human nature will probably dictate that more people will respond better to an accessible, relatable film that throws in a bit of humour and perhaps doesn't beat you over the head, than if you were to say, you do it my way, you do it entirely that way, or you can take a hike, we don't want you. It's kind of a bit of a no-brainer.
So just talking about the film itself, in terms of how you got it off the ground, it sounds like it's a project that's a labour of love and took quite a few years. I imagine there's a story behind that. Tell us a little bit about how it got off the ground, if it's not too painful.
No, it's just the reality more than painful. So we talked for a long time, Giles and I, about making a film together. We're filmmakers, we're friends. We enjoyed working together on films where we're both acting. I played a part in a short film he directed at the beginning of his directing career. We just get along, as per what you see in the film as well. We just two mates, enjoy the process. So we talked for a while about doing something of meaning, something that was going to serve a purpose rather than just entertain. Hopefully both, but I initially came up with the idea of what is now that element of Food for Thought, which is the vegan participants, those folks who very kindly went vegan for 30 days, documented their journey for us by way of video diaries. And I think that's probably one of the things that makes it as accessible and relatable as it is those people. They're just so real, and that they're so varied in the sense that so many different people will find someone they relate to, because it will be their same part of the journey that they're on, or their similar personality, or it's just someone that resonates with them for whatever reason. And initially all I thought was, wouldn't it be simple to just, because filmmaking is a big deal, as we know. It's quite a tough process, and it is a labour of love, you're right, but it's worth it because it was a cause. But I thought, wouldn't it be so easy to just say to folks, hey, listen, try a vegan diet for 30 days, let us know how it goes, and just piece that together as it wouldn't have been the same documentary, of course, and it probably wouldn't have done well as a standalone piece, but I thought it'd be interesting, because it's essentially what that was designed to do, was to take away the opinion and just show the fact. Like, it doesn't matter whether or not it's what you would experience, it's what they experienced. And again, if one of those folks, or more than one of them, resonates with you, then it might be, oh, okay, well, they seem to be doing all right. First week was a bit tough, maybe. The second week they seem to feel great, and by the end of it they feel like a different person. That's what we thought would be really powerful. And that's actually the foundation of Food for Thought. The original idea was just that. And as soon as we got that off the ground as a sort of a concept, and we started to talk about more, and how do you actually make it a compelling story? How do you make it watchable? Because really, that, with the best will in the world, you probably couldn't fill an hour and a half with that and keep people's attention. Even though I still, as I say, I think they form an absolute backbone of the film. So that was the original concept, and then everything else grew from there, and it started to kind of generate an energy of its own. So the whole Croatia section happened through a dear friend of mine, a contact, Margaret Coates. She's a very world-renowned animal healer, and she put me in touch with her publishing company over in Croatia, who happened to be involved in the festival called Zega Vega, a vegan festival in Zagreb, where, as you see in the film, it's quite a big deal, and they invited us over to be a big part of that, literally to be a fundamental part of it, and talk and meet people and film. And so it started to take shape in that way. And then, as we also discover, I had business over in LA and in South Africa. Well, it's just a case of, I'll take my camera with me and we'll just shoot some stuff there, because we crowdfunded the budget, and it's probably broadly equivalent to the coffee that was on a Batman movie or something. It's it's tiny budget. So it seems like a lot of money if you just hear the number, but it's really not. It's a tiny amount of money for making a film, and it's especially that really that meant that it took so long, because it wasn't sufficient money that Giles and I could pay ourselves a salary and just stop doing other stuff and make Food for Thought from beginning to end. We had to just dip in and out of it in between work that we were doing to make an income. And then the pandemic hit. So, of course, with the best will in the world, we could be putting as much of our spare time into it as we could, which we were many times at weekends, or if we had gaps in our work projects, we would focus a week or two on food for thought. But it's a long process, and it takes us around the world, as we've seen, and essentially when the pandemic hit, it actually just put a halt to the production completely. We didn't have sufficient to be okay. Well, we can just edit together what we've got and start making tracks on that. It was a real showstopper for the good 2 years at the beginning of it, because ironically we had a couple of interviews lined up with one person based in Los Angeles or San Francisco, but California, and one in Rome. And if you remember back in the day when the pandemic really started to kick off, those were the two epicenters. Italy was the European epicenter, and California was the US epicenter. And it just put a halt to everything. I mean, we couldn't have gone even if we wanted to, but it was of all the places, it was where it was least likely you're ever going to be able to travel for the next little while. But ironically, that did turn out to be something that was to our advantage as well, because in the film we were sort of exploring the possibility that this was a movement that was going at that point from marginalized to mainstream. So those extra couple of years, albeit very strange years, just added a couple more years, 3 years to the period of time through which we were able to analyze that, to assess whether that was the case, which of course is clear to see now it is. It's bigger than ever. And so overall it took us about 7 years, which is the same length of time that it took them to make Avatar. So it kind of puts into perspective just how much faster we should have been able to do it. But with all things being equal, had we just been given a budget and a time frame, the film would have been shot in 6 months and we'd have had it out in a year. That's the nature of low budget filmmaking. Would I do it again? I actually probably would. I'd love to make it happen faster. I'd love to have a bit more money that I can actually hire people to do stuff and make it happen faster. But we, as you know, even just doing a podcast, you're doing your own vision, your own sound, your own edit, your own everything. And we, other than the necessities of, like, we had an editor who worked with us, and we've had someone do some grading for us. That's all after the event. We pulled favors here and there, had some extra camera operators if we needed a couple of angles, or had someone helping us in various different ways from time to time. But 90 to 95% of it was just myself and Giles, with every single responsibility under the sun, and it just took so long. So labour of love is right, but we also had an absolute inherent need in both of us to get it right rather than to get it out, because we could have put it out a year or two before, but it wouldn't be the film it is. And we just thought, you know what, once it's out, and you can't undo that and go, sorry guys, we're going to just bring it out of the public eye and tweak it and then re-release it. You've got one opportunity, so you better get it right, and it's too important not to get right. So it took an awfully long time, but it was worth it, I hope.
It really was. I think it's a great film. I think it's going to touch a lot of people. It's going to, importantly, I think it's going to communicate with the right folks in the right tone. I think that's, for me anyway, I think it would have been something that would have, try and think back to my pre-vegan life. I think it would have resonated because of that, not feeling so preachy. And so, I think it's definitely worth the effort. Thinking about the number of subjects, and again talking about that relatability, what really struck me as well is the broad scope that the documentary kind of took in. So you had everyone from kind of hench herbivore to, like you say, real life folks talking about their 30-day challenges, to the links with zoonotics and the pandemic. There was that touched upon that, to the commerce side and the big business element, Beyond Meat and so on. To the subjects were really broad, and touched upon in a way that was relatable and made everything feel like it was a kind of a coherent movement. Was that quite important to you, to cover that kind of breadth of subject?
It was actually, yeah. And ultimately the whole film takes the form of, Giles and I are a couple of mates. We are off to explore what's happening in the background. Why is the vegan movement growing so much at the moment? Why are people turning vegan? Or the folks who already are vegan, why did they do it? What's the driving forces behind it? And it felt like if and again, there's a place for all of this. It's not a suggestion that there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. We're trying to fill all the gaps so that everyone's accommodated, everyone's catered to, depending on their individual preferences, depending on what resonates with them. And so if it's a conversational thing where you're just coming along for the ride, and it's kind of like, oh yeah, I'll see. I wonder what this guy's got to say, and he happens to say, oh my God, look how much land is being used for animal farming across the world, and look how much wasted food there is, and look how many starving people could be fed by that. It's not like we're forcing facts down your throat and saying you're bad because you're contributing to this. We're just going, we're literally going, oh wow. And hopefully the audience is going, oh wow, at the same time as us, and finding out, they're discovering with us. Of course, we set out knowing to some extent what we were going to find out. For example, there was no surprises that the three driving forces fundamentally are the environment, our own personal health, or animal welfare, or a combination of any of those three things. So there's no surprises there. But what is surprising is when those folks, like Philip Limbury that I just quoted, talks about the real statistics. And he's not trying to sell you anything really. So I think it's much more palatable for that reason. And you could say maybe one of the most poignant sound bites in the whole film for me is where you have Mate Rimac, who's the chap from Croatia who created Rimac's automobile, a car which looks like the Batmobile, and it's now owned by Bugatti, by the way, since the filming of the film. Bugatti have bought that car, and if I'm not mistaken, it's the fastest production road car on the planet, electric. So here's a guy whose entire livelihood depends on him manufacturing electric cars and selling them. And as you've heard in the film, we have him saying, this is great, and this is what I do, and I'm a part of this, and all the resources and the money and the time and effort put into trying to reduce the impact that cars have on our planet and our environment. But you can have a much bigger impact just by reducing your meat consumption. And it's, as he says, much easier, because rather than trying to shift an entire industry to face a different direction, which is like trying to turn a cruise liner around, you're standing in the supermarket and go, I'll have that instead of that. I'm going to have lunch, so I'll make that choice at that moment, and I've done some good, and so much good that it outweighs all of what the industry is doing in the motor industry, coming from a guy who's a leader in the motor industry. So poignant, it's like, so we really did find a lot of these things just happening. It was amazing as well, because you're in the middle of filming it, and my job was to just like listen to what they had to say, and a lot of the time I was like, oh my God, like, this is amazing. I can't believe we've just got that. It's like a trailer moment. It's a piece of gold where these folks were throwing different statistics, different facts back down to our like really down to earth individuals who everyone can relate to, like Claire and Roy, the two people who both, we're not claiming to be medical professionals. We're not stating anything other than their story, and their story is profoundly impactful. They believe that they've changed, if not saved, their lives with the vegan diet. And so we absolutely found some surprises along the way, and we hope that the audience sees it and realizes we're discovering those things organically rather than it's all been sort of set so that we're just trying to spoon feed a bunch of biased information that serves a purpose for us. Needless to say, we're not going to put, I'm sure there's someone out there that thinks that, in fact, we know there are people out there who think that an exclusively carnivore diet, and I don't just mean to keep eating meat, I mean only eat meat. There's people out there who think that the only healthy way to live is to just eat meat exclusively, no fruit, no vegetables, no nothing, just meat 3 times a day. I don't want to get into an argument with them. They're so unreachable to me and to the film that it's like, you're not my target audience. You can think what you like. And actually, funny enough, I actually just, when those sorts of comments come up on, which of course they do, and they'll come up on the YouTube channel or social media where it's like, I'm going to have a couple of extra cheeseburgers tonight just to celebrate your film and to make up for the fact that you're vegan. I'm not going to engage with that. I'm just going to delete it because it's pointless. What's the point? We don't need that energy, and we're not going to achieve a thing by talking to them, because they don't want a discussion or a debate or a reasonable argument. They just want to fight. And if you say, you could say the most articulate, brilliantly constructed response, and all they do is move the goalposts or just go, ha, triggered. And it's like, okay, what's the point? So, you know what I mean? You've got to pick and choose what you put your energy into.
The film really feels like the sort of start of a conversation for me, rather than the kind of end of a conversation, if that makes sense. It's not, like you said, it's not trying to say here's the definitive answer on X, Y, or Z subject. It's trying to, like you say, here's a discovery from two guys. This is what we've found out. Some of that is going to trigger you to go and have a look at something else and to find out some more. And I think that's kind of really, really powerful. Are you seeing people's reaction in line with that? Are you seeing the folks who it is reaching at? Is that the kind of reaction that you're seeing?
It is. It's beautiful because I mean beautiful to the point of, Giles and I have talked about this since the film's release. It's enough to bring you to tears. Partly because of that 7-year process we talked about, the labour of love, the blood, sweat and tears, to then have it validated by people saying, this made me feel this, it's made me do that, it's ticked every box that we were thinking we wanted to achieve. We set out with these objectives of all the things we've talked about, and the key one, of course, being for them to take their first steps on the path, or indeed to just fully throw themselves onto it. And we've had both. We've had everything. It's been incredible, which is again why I really don't care what the haters say, if you want to call them that, whatever the criticisms. I don't care, because we're making a difference. And if I had created a film that, I should say, if we had created a film that ticks every box for the extreme vegan community, I would have changed a grand total of nothing. We would have literally changed nothing. We'd have made no difference to the animals or the environment, because they were already on our side. And all we'd have done is an ego project looking to get a round of applause from people who already agreed with us, which would have been just ridiculous and absolutely pointless. But what we have seen is, right from even at the premiere in London, probably my favourite message of all is from a friend of mine who he's a personal trainer, and he isn't vegan, wasn't vegan anyway. And on the evening of the premiere, I got a message from him literally saying, it was a gorgeous message, and we were inundated with this sort of thing. But this particular one, it said, I just want to let you know that even though I've been influenced over the last few years and I've been thinking about stuff, he said, I made a decision while watching your film, which is that I will never eat meat again, or an animal product again. And I met him. See, you think to yourself, it's easy to say that, and then let's see the reality. I met up with him just last week, and he's 100% committed to the cause. Perhaps even more impactful than that was a chap who asked the first question at the premiere. The first question of the Q&A was a very surprising question. It was perfect, because it was exactly the kind of audience we were going for. It was someone who didn't have any understanding of the emotional connection that people feel towards animals, which is hard for us to believe, right? It's like, you think, surely I can, if nothing else, if you think climate change is a hoax, and if you're the healthiest guy on earth and you've been eating meat your whole life, you know, I'm not going to convince you that way. But look, if I just put this gorgeous little creature in front of you, you don't want to cut its throat, do you? This is the sort of person that would have gone, yeah, I'm hungry, why wouldn't I? We couldn't really resolve the conversation. The question, it merged into a longer conversation, which we had to move away from in the end, because it seemed like it was one of those, almost like the online debate that I was just talking about, where there's a pointlessness to it, because you're not going to suddenly have this person go, oh yeah, now I get it, now I love animals, it's just not going to happen. But lo and behold, the very next morning I got a message. And I should just backtrack a little bit. Our answers weren't judgmental. They weren't preachy. We didn't chastise or vilify him. So our personal responses echoed the approach of the film. And I think this is key in what happened next. Was I got a message from his wife the next morning saying, I'm not saying anything publicly yet, but on the way home, we stopped for food, and he asked for a vegan option. And I didn't even question it. I didn't bring it up. And then fast forward to about 2 weeks ago, so about, what would that be, about a month and a bit after the film, he's still vegan. And he didn't, and this is the key thing. I think this is really important to recognize and acknowledge this and accept it. More often than not, we're not going to know we've changed somebody. So it's lovely to get the messages saying, your film changed me. I'm not eating meat because of it. That's wonderful. But then again, do I care more about being told I've made a difference or making a difference? And the answer is clear. I want to make a difference. And if I never find out I've made a difference, but more animals live and more animals stop suffering because of that difference, well, like, it would be just utterly deplorable to prioritize anything else. So, you know, we couldn't be happier with the responses we've been getting, and they're from all the way from that extreme version where someone's just literally, it's like a switch has been flicked, which happens to people quite often. It happened to me. It happened overnight. To the folks saying, all right, I'm not going to pretend I'm going vegan, but I am going to start introducing more plant-based food, and we're going to do this every week, or we're going to do Meatless Monday, or we're going to do Veganuary, and all the things we talk in the film about the importance of encouraging rather than saying, no, that's not good enough. Because if you do the simple maths, I mean, there's actually more like 8 billion people on Earth, but for the sake of simple maths, if there were 7 billion people on Earth and everyone did Meatless Monday, that's like 1 billion vegans in one go. So yes, we encourage that kind of thing, and we all ought to be encouraging it, because I think you hit the nail on the head. If they find their own way onto that path, you can bet that it's going to be more sustainable. It's going to be that it will have longevity, in so much as it's coming from within. They're not being forced to do something. It's not a bunch of rules they have to abide by. It's just inherently, organically, authentically, they're growing and evolving in that direction. That's going to stick. That's going to last. And it's just, you can liken it to anything, like, you know, someone giving up alcohol because they've got a partner who's, you know, offended by it and is not going to tolerate it. And then what happens when they split? Does that mean you just hit the bottle the second you split? It's not going to have that kind of staying power. So we love it when people find their way onto the path in their way, in their time. Obviously, it goes without saying, I would love for it to happen overnight. I would absolutely love it. More to wake up one morning and there's been a conscious shift and everyone says, I'm vegan. The meat industry and the dairy industry have collapsed. Wouldn't that be wonderful? But it's the stuff of fantasy. It's not going to happen. It's not the real world. As much as we wish it was, it doesn't matter how much we want it to be. It doesn't. The facts are, it's not going to happen that way. So, whichever ways we can creep further towards that, I embrace fully.
Amazing. So, it's been amazing chat with you, Dan. I think the film's fantastic. I think what I would say to folks listening, and obviously we have a lot of vegan folks listening, is this is for me a great film to recommend to that friend of yours who you think may be receptive. It's really helpful in that regard, I think, to help people start the conversation. Like I said, where would folks go to get hold of the film and watch it? Dan, I think you mentioned earlier it was on YouTube, but where's all the places to check it out?
Yeah. Well, actually, it is just YouTube, and that kind of reflects, again, the principle we've held to from the beginning of making the documentary is accessibility and relatability. The accessibility part, it would be ironic to make a really accessible film in terms of its content, but then say you've got to have Netflix to watch it, or you've got to pay this much to see it. So we put it on YouTube free of charge. It's going to sit there forever. It's on YouTube. You just go food. In fact, if you go to YouTube and just type food for thought, I'm delighted to say that we now come up top because we've had about 20, at the time of recording this, about 27,000 views in the first 2 weeks, which is wonderful. So we've tickled the algorithm and we're quite high up the list. And food for thought is obviously quite a common phrase. So we're thrilled about that. But if you don't find it that way, just go to YouTube and type in the channel Food for Thought Doc, DOC for documentary, Food for Thought Doc, and you'll be able to see the film for free right there. And thank you for what you said about the film as well, because that's another exactly the sort of principle based upon which we made it, which was to say we want it to be a tool for the folks that have that friend or that family member that's just like, maybe not, they're not on the verge of doing it, but they're receptive, they're open-minded. You send them the film, they're not going to come back to you and say, I felt like I was being told I was a bad person, or I watched some footage that I can never unsee. There's no graphic images in there. It's family friendly. There's some humour. There's lots of breadth, as you say, in the subject matter that's covered, and it's nice and gentle. It's softly approached, and we hope that people will just very comfortably be able to send it out and say, "Here, watch this. You'll enjoy it." It's not gonna. You're not gonna be offended, at least, unless you don't think our jokes are funny.
100%. Yeah, share it with a friend. All the links will be in the show notes. Dan, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Jim. It's been a pleasure.